Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance's Crypto Roundup for May 22nd, 2026. I'm losing track of the days. Thank you all for being here. Our usual disclaimers before we begin. Obviously, nothing David or Josh or I are discussing is any sort of investment or legal advice. And really, the descriptions and conversations we're having are our own personal opinions, not necessarily the opinions of our respective firms. I am so happy to once again be here with David Brill and Josh Klayman. David, Josh, it's been another busy week. It's good to see you both.
It's great to see you too, Ron.
Lots of things going on amongst our group and in the crypto space.
It is interesting because we spent 2 weeks traveling on and off together. It was Miami and it was Washington. And in the back of my head, I'm like, they're going to have to get sick and tired of seeing me at some point along the line. But there's a lot to cover, David and Josh. Josh, I'm just going to throw it out there. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm very excited. For those who don't know, I just joined Perkins Coie, soon to be Ashurst Perkins Coie, in the next months, and I'm just really excited. I feel like I've joined the Avengers.
The Avengers.
That's what I keep saying. That's what I keep saying. That's how it
Crypto
feels.
Avengers is going to be a trademark. Josh,
Yeah.
Congratulations again. David, Josh, let's kick it off. And I think we're still working through some of the mechanics post our Washington trip, and the clarity continues to come up. David, you chaired our crypto asset working group yesterday, which is always a fascinating working group session. A good chunk of it ended up being the mechanics of how a bill becomes law, essentially, and clarity moving forward. What are your thoughts and perspectives on clarity's possibility before the end of the summer?
You know, I felt like I could start singing that song on ABC that we used to hear growing up.
Schoolhouse Rock still rules.
How a bill becomes a law. So here's where we stand right now. The Senate Banking Committee voted 15-9 on May 14th to advance the Digital Asset Market Clarity Act. You know, sending the first really comprehensive Senate crypto market structure bill to the floor. Congressman Tim Scott framed it as a historic bipartisan step with 2 Democrats, Senators Elsa Brooks and Ruben Gallego, joining 13 Republicans to support the bill. Now the hard part is merging a similar version with the Senate Ag Committee bill that was passed on a straight line Republican basis, with the Republican majority. And I think there's really 2 major things. There's sort of the ethics issue that's outstanding, and the DeFi issue is outstanding. And those are 2 things that there'll be time to work through. But I think in order to really get this bill to the floor for a vote, it really it needs to happen quickly, because there's several other bills that are on the floor coming up and as well. So I think that there's a housing bill. I think there might be an immigration bill. Yeah. So I think that's really important. That this gets to the floor quickly, and also it's midterms.
Yeah.
So, 2 other dynamics that were brought up by the group is that obviously a number of the senators have been supported by Fair Shake, and so Fair Shake is very keenly watching voting on this bill, and will act accordingly in the November election. So I think some of the lobbying that we talked about is coming to pass.
Yeah, David, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. The last thing is in case people don't know, you need 60 votes to get out of cloture in the Senate. So everybody's going to be keying on, will 10 senators come across to join on a bipartisan basis.
David, thanks so much. Just on the comments, shout out to Rumi over in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you for watching, and of course, he gives the congratulations to Josh.
Aww.
David's a really good point. I want to preface some of this, and Josh, I'd love your perspectives. You weren't on the Crypto Asset Working Group meeting, but one of the things I took away from that conversation yesterday, David, and it's a really good background that you gave. There was a point not too long ago where the 3 of us looked at the anti-crypto brigade in DC, who the usual senators and congresspeople, for a variety of reasons, they very much seem defanged now, and they certainly will have their pushback on investor protections. And there's the issues you brought up around ethics in DeFi, but the contingent in Washington that is firmly anti-crypto, Josh, seems much smaller. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I mean, I don't know what's happening behind the scenes or how they may feel in their private moments. However, I think we can attribute a lot of this. Some may say, some cynics may say, oh, well, because there's so much funding towards, towards legislators or, campaigns and things. But I think it goes further than that. I think that the more and more crypto and digital assets and the underlying technology becomes mainstream, right, and is used across industries by major players, by traditional folks, as well as the, crypto natives.
Yeah.
I think to the extent that people have supporters from across the board, whether they have direct contacts to crypto or not, I think that it will become harder and harder for people to say, oh, crypto's nothing, right? If you're supported, say, by a particular, industry group that has nothing to do with crypto, but where the members themselves are investing or building or doing something important in digital assets.
Yeah. Josh, David, to move forward on that point a little bit as well, we've talked about the political headwinds for a long, long time. And sometimes it seems like they're easing up, and then it's geopolitical headwinds, David, and then it's inflation headwinds, and then it's jobs data headwinds, and then it's the Fed headwinds. I'm pleasantly surprised we're holding where we're holding on some of the bigger cryptos like Bitcoin and ETH, David. And I want to talk a little bit about that price action. You and I have been talking about this for a long, long time. There seems to be a very comfortable channel for Bitcoin at this place. Am I overreading that? And we've seen other news. We've seen outflows of ETFs. We've seen this kind of lots of headwinds from an inflation and geopolitical perspective, but Bitcoin's holding its own. Is that a good channel, or am I misreading the David Brill tea leaves?
So Bitcoin's holding its own. I mean, in the sense that it's not at 60K or 40K, that's good. I think when you look at other assets across the spectrum, I would like to see it be regaining momentum. But I think, as you said, the macro data is fairly negative right now. And look, in fairness, like we do have two conflicts going on, and the conflict in the Middle East has raised oil prices and energy prices. And, you've heard companies, even Walmart, say when they did their earnings that, they had a solid quarter, but they were feeling the effects of energy prices and were moderating how they share that with consumers. So I think that all things being considered, yes, it's nice that it's holding in this range. Would I like to see it, more ascending and getting past like the 200-day and things like that? Yes. So I'd say we're like standing in place. I think Ether's lost some ground, which is a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's trailing back to 2000, but there is, a little bit of a silver lining, and we don't usually talk about, macro or sort of micro areas in crypto, but as you both know, I've been a big fan of AI crypto tokens, and we've talked about it many times, and I think you're really starting to see that some of those AI crypto tokens, along with hype, are really getting traction. So again, this is not investment advice. I'm just going to sort of pull some of these because of the numbers, but your protocol, which is one of the AI crypto tokens, I think it's had a really robust month, and I think it might have doubled already this month. BitTensor has had a nice run. A smaller cap one that I like called Origin Trails had a nice run. And, a couple of others like Render, Virtuals Protocol, and one called FET, which is Artificial Superintelligence Alliance. All are, AI related or AI adjacent, and they've had a nice run.
David,
what we've seen in sort of AI stocks.
Yeah. So let me ask that question for people in the audience who may not know. What are you getting with an AI token? What does it represent?
Well, some of them are like decentralized GPU cloud for AI training.
Yeah.
Some of them are, helping using competitive AI models for earning rewards. Some are trusted data layers for AI to query. I'm very fascinated, regardless of which token it is, that the idea that blockchain can be used to validate AI queries. So the idea that you can query facts on, using AI and then go to the blockchain to confirm like the veracity of this. I think it's fascinating. And I'm technically speaking, I'm doing it a disservice because it's much more complicated than that. But like the idea of decentralized knowledge graphs are really interesting. And it also plays into something Josh is passionate about with Quanta.
Yep. So Josh, weigh in here. I'm assuming the Klayman family office is looking at some of these AI tokens. But what are your thoughts on? So it feels like an evolution or convergence of the world the three of us have been talking about for a long time, and AI. Do you have that same perspective, and quantum for that matter?
I do, and I mean, not to throw in another word, but also photonics, which is also coming to the fore just because of the incredible heat and energy requirements of things that include AI, right? And just data and quantum, right? Quantum computers and all of this stuff, as well as mining, right? So I think, yes, there's an incredible convergence, and I think it is it's something every people should be aware of at the board level, like we've been talking about, right? Looking at something in isolation, you can miss a lot of risk and a lot of opportunity. I would just one thing, if it's okay, if I could just jump back to something that David had mentioned with respect to clarity.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a parallel that we're seeing across the world in a way. So as you guys likely know, I'm sure, but for the people at home, Mika had a carve out for DeFi, right? Excluded it. And there is a new Mika consultation that's imminent. And the terms of that discussion are still, under debate, under discussion. I participated in a roundtable, a closed door roundtable as part of the Vienna Blockchain Week. And the topic was DeFi under Mika, shaping the next framework. It was arranged by Natalie Boyk, as well as, I just want to give a quick shout out, if that's okay, just so I know the people, Nucleus 42 and Sarah Hempel. And it had tax advisors, policy folks, me, and some others. But one of the things that's being grappled with is what to do with DeFi and whether it should be brought within the regulatory perimeter, and if so, how. And so a lot of questions came up in terms of level of control. How do you know if it's really decentralized? All these sorts of things. Is it even big enough to be systemically important? And does regulating it actually help in terms of attracting digital asset businesses and other sorts of things? There were lots of different things. Obviously, it was under Chatham House rules, so can't attribute messages. But it was fascinating how much that conversation paralleled what we're seeing with the debates over DeFi in the U.S. And coming back to things like, what are the money laundering risks, all these sorts of sanctions risks, etc. One thing that I think that the Senate banking draft for clarity, if you look at the FAQs, just the quick and dirty of that. Although if you want to read the whole bill, of course, and our friends at Cahill have put together some sort of heat map, right? Shout out to them.
That was a really great infographic.
Yes. One of the things I really liked that relate to DeFi is just this idea of basically a voluntary, holding aside whether and how it should actually be regulated, right? But having a voluntary sort of framework pursuant to which developers, even if we do have a carve out for liability, can try and make these things cyber resistant, right? Resistant to attacks. And that makes me think of things like Mythos, right? And attacks on code, but also quantum and the rest. So I think regardless of where we come out with regulating DeFi, and I think this is global, not just the US, I think having an acknowledgement of the convergence, Ron, that you and David were talking about is going to be paramount.
Yeah, Josh, I totally agree. And real quick shout out for everyone who's watching. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've got comments or questions for David or Josh or I, please put them in the chat. I also want to point out that every time I talk to the two of you, I end up with homework for the weekend because now I have to dig into photonics, Josh. So I do appreciate that. David, weigh in on this a little bit. And one of the things I've often said, when we look at the challenges of understanding and implementing safeguards or potential regulations for DeFi, and when we look at AI and the mythos around mythos, for example. David, are we still in a world where regulation just can't keep up with the pace of innovation? And is that a danger?
So yes, it can't, but frankly, in fairness to regulators,
Mm-hmm.
most of the general public can't either.
Fair point.
I mean, unless you're really tech focused, I think a lot of the general public, like quanta means one thing to us and something to somebody else. Photonics, I really think it's if you're either a tech person or you're an investor who's in this space. Otherwise, I think it's not really realistic that people can be expected to be so up to date on all these different parts of ecosystem. And look, and there's another thing, somewhat related to that, where you're seeing the crypto miners, move from being Bitcoin miners to AI miners, and not necessarily mining for AI, but more like using their grids for AI. So I think that you're seeing that too. So there's like constant change. So I think we have to give the regulators some grace on that. I will say with regard to DeFi that I do think there's still some very important issues that need to get resolved. And I think what's really important is that we've got to try and hold the line on software developers who are developing these protocols and not using them in a nefarious way, having protection so that they can't be accused of something later on.
Yeah.
I think that's really core. And, remember, we've been trading securities for years and years and now trading crypto for a few years. But we've never had the invention of really trading a share of Apple for a share of Amazon. And this is really a DeFi invention.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to chill that creativity, the ability to do these things. And so I think it's really important, regardless if you're a centralized exchange fan or a decentralized exchange fan, to really support, this part of the ecosystem.
David, it's a really good point, and you bring up a couple of things that are worth talking about. And again, that pace of innovation accelerating is critical. But when we talk about DeFi, and this is one of my, I don't want to call it a sticking point, but it's something the three of us have spoken about a lot. I keep seeing the media portrayal of tokenized securities. And we've got to talk about the regulators. We've got to talk about innovation exemptions and that other stuff as well. But to me, there's still this fundamental mischaracterization or misunderstanding generally of a token that points to or represents an underlying security versus an actual on-chain security. And my concern is that dichotomy is not being addressed appropriately. And I think that's not an easy thing to do. But Josh, do you see that same dichotomy? Do you see that same break perceptually? I get calls regularly from someone saying, we just put real estate on the blockchain. No, you didn't. And I'm just curious about why that's not easily solvable.
Yeah, I think that's something that absolutely, just anecdotally, right? I think we see, and I imagine that's emblematic of what people are seeing on a larger scale. Yeah, I mean, I think it is hard for people to get their minds wrapped around, because to your points, guys, like the fact that you can now potentially sell one type of, or in the future, trade one type of stock for another type of stock, without returning back to fiat, right, or to dollars or something, is new. But yes, this whole concept of who is the issuer? Does the issuer know you exist?
Right.
Is the token, even if the issuer does know you exist, and even if the issuer, is this token the actual equity, or is it a record, a receipt, something else?
An IOU of the security. Yeah.
Exactly. Is there, have you really dematerialized from the underlying documents? And a question, and this is holding aside the whole third party, right, and all those permutations. But I think one thing that people forget about, and this makes me think of real estate as well, but when you're thinking about, whether you can tokenize the actual security, the actual equity, you also have to look into state law, right? You have to see, does state law permit this? Do I still need to have this underlying? Or can I just set this free and have this be my only equity? I think that's very important, right? Knowing, like, for example, if you have like proxy voting, all sorts of things, right? Like how are you doing annual voting? All these kinds of things.
Yeah.
But it makes me think as well with real estate, because a lot of times people tell me that they've tokenized real estate. And I'm like, oh, how are you handling the county level filings?
Right.
And no,
Right.
they haven't.
Exactly. And Josh, you may know this. David's heard this already. I'm a proxy nerd. I vote every proxy I ever get. So when I see these, I've got tokenized security platforms. My first question, because I'm that proxy nerd, is, do I get voting rights? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, no. So David, weigh in on this as well. Let me expand upon that, because you and I have that Wall Street background and we talk about all wonky Wall Street things. What about transfer agents? What does that look like, David, in a world of tokenized securities?
Well, it is fascinating, and having spent 5+ years being a GC of a transfer agent, I can tell you that in the 20
I softballed that for you, David.
yes, but in the 20 teens when I was general counsel, I think from an operations standpoint, people were barely hanging on to handling share certificates and removing legends and things like that in a orderly way. So look at it's got a couple of flavors. Like as far as notifying shareholders of different corporate events and proxies, I think that's still a work in progress how it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we saw one of the big transfer agents get acquired. Figure has an arrangement for a transfer agent, so I think they are being brought into the umbrella, sort of the house.
Yeah.
But I think it's a work in process, and I think that the innovation exemption that we're expecting to see soon is ideally going to address some of that. And I have some notes on that I can share too. But it's a work in progress. I don't think people fully appreciate the whys. And I think what we can do as a community is explain, well, somebody said to me, well, what's the big deal? Like, why do we want to tokenize securities when you can already buy them on legacy platforms? And really, I think the issue is sort of being able to buy them more than the trading hours that they trade. And then the ability to use them as collateral. And I think that's like two really big themes. I think we and the community at large really can do a better job of explaining. Because otherwise I get the same question from, friends of mine who are in legacy TradFi, like, well, what's the point?
Right. Josh, real quickly, just want to do a shout out to Mark Pilkington. Tokenization is mind-boggling. You got that right, buddy. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks, Ron. I was just going to say to David's point about what was the last thing you said?
The functionality of
yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. So another thing that I think people point to is liquidity, right? So if you have previously pretty illiquid interests, say in a private fund, right, being able to tokenize those interests, right, just opening up the number of folks that you could have as your counterparties, I think that is a big draw too. One thing I would just like to also do is say, this seems to be all happening so fast, right? This idea of tokenized stocks. But actually, if we think back 10 years, right, and we think of what was going on with Andrea Tiniano and as the blockchain czar for the Delaware Blockchain Initiative, I mean, my recollection is that a lot of the moving parts were put into play back then, right? About the ability, the foresight to say, hey, maybe you don't need a person to make certain updates, right? And changing simple words within the statute to permit stock on a blockchain. So just wanted to shout out to that.
No, it's a really good point. Shout out to Andrea. I haven't spoken to her in a bit. She was one of the real pioneers in the early days. David, Josh, it also makes, we keep talking about the federal overlay of security. You can absolutely drink coffee on camera, Josh. I mean, I don't know where your WSBA is, but
I don't know my mug is either. I was having my Wawa.
I will have a mug sent to you. But David, Josh,
Thank you.
A lot of the conversation is the focus or overlay of securities regulators at the federal level, commodities regulators at the federal level, for example. I want to, tearing up the script a little bit, there's also the state conversation. I want to do a shout out to David Pope, longtime WSBA member, and the work that's happening at Wyoming with their own frontier token. And I wonder if it's fully acknowledged in the industry that states are now looking to upgrade how they exchange value on behalf of their citizens as well. David, are you seeing that also? It feels like the states are kind of galloping. It's Wyoming, so all puns intended about galloping forward. But states are moving forward on some of this, aren't they?
Yeah, I think Wyoming, my state of Florida has been passing some helpful legislation. Look, I think I'm still of a top-down kind of person. I still think we need to get it right on the federal level,
Yeah.
and the states can follow. But I do think it is really promising that some of the states have been forward-thinking and really trying to get out there and be thoughtful and find ways to use, whether it's tokenization or creating a stable coin. There's so much cost that can be wrung out of the system with these products. So I think that's really positive. I think a lot of the states have so many other issues on their plates right now that this isn't a priority, but I do think it is a good sign that, some of the more forward-looking states are getting involved.
Yeah, Josh, are you concerned at all about broadly federal preemption that might get in the way of some of the things states are doing?
I mean, federal preemption cuts both ways, right? So in one sense, if there is federal preemption, there certainly are organizations that might be helped by that. Certainly, if there is federal preemption in certain things, given the states that we have and given the passion that these states feel for offering an alternative path, and one that if you speak with some of them, they would say, we're resistant to the whims of Washington, the winds rather of Washington, the whims and the winds of Washington, right? And so no matter which side of the aisle, assuming that this somehow remains or becomes again, depending on your perspective, a more partisan issue than otherwise.
Yeah.
The states could still provide that path. I do think there would be lawsuits by states. I could foresee that, but also I would say I have to imagine that there's some kind of a I would call it a middle road, but I guess it's not a middle road. I think this idea that somehow if you had state reciprocity, right, like some sort of recognition that was built in saying okay, you're going to take the state route and then somehow, now that's another kind of federal preemption to say that. And of course that would lead to lawsuits as well, I'm sure, with other states pushing back. But I think, yeah.
I just stopping there makes my brain try to figure out how to unpack everything you just threw out there, Josh. So there's a lot. Thanks for that, Josh.
Oh, well, I mean, thanks. What I would say is I have multiple minds of it, right? On one hand, I think about clients, right, and people in the industry who are trying to comply and they're trying to have as smooth a path as possible, and also as certain a path as possible. And so wanting to preserve different options, and then or maybe wanting to have some kind of recognition if they do take a state path.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think of the states and I think, wow, these states are doing some amazing things, right? And they are really pioneers, literally, certainly in the case of Wyoming. And would I want them not to be able to do that? I mean, personally, no, right? I want them to be able to, yeah.
Josh, thanks. Adesola, we love you too. Thank you for watching. David, I want to rip up the script a little bit more, yet one more time. And I want to talk a little bit about prediction markets. And I'm curious, I don't want to go too deep on this because I know some people have very, very intense perspectives on prediction markets. But what's the intersection of prediction markets and crypto? And do you think it's harming crypto for wider adoption?
In the first instance, I'm a big fan of prediction markets. And
why? For the audience, could you tell us why?
Well, I think they've really captured the imagination of the public. And, you can look at big events and you can see a robust prediction market, looking at, let's take some of the primaries. I was watching one or two of the primaries and you could see the big moves in the prediction markets ahead of the final tally for the primaries. Even before the voting is closed, you could see it. and in some ways, it's been more efficient than our networks who are calling things out, and so they've gotten ahead of them. And so I really love the idea that they're taking a combination of sort of consumer sentiment, some of their own knowledge, and wrapping it together in a marketplace where people can, make predictions on things. I mean, I think the issue with the prediction markets that I think people are most vexed about is that are people benefiting from confidential information and enriching themselves using prediction markets.
Yeah.
So I like to split the argument between, I feel like generally people are in favor of prediction markets. I think a lot of tech people like prediction markets. And I think there's a cohort that is concerned that people are taking advantage of insider information and are enriching themselves by using prediction markets. The last thing with regards to crypto is that the prediction markets have become the faster money than crypto was.
Right.
And so you're seeing a lot of liquidity go from crypto to prediction markets, where you can have binary outcomes in real time. Like I'll just use the NBA, for example. There's basketball playoffs going on. If you thought the Knicks were going to beat Cleveland last night, you could make a prediction that the Knicks will win, and then a couple hours later you're going to have a result. So crypto has actually become a little slower, for hot money than prediction markets, which have binary results, and you can make money quicker.
David, thanks. Josh, I don't know about you, but I wonder where prediction markets were when I wagered a steak dinner with David on the price of Bitcoin. It might have went really well for me or really badly beyond dinner.
I heard they were like 95% on me, Ron.
I don't doubt it. Josh, go ahead.
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting about prediction markets, and certainly there is a place for them, and certainly they're very popular and useful, I think. But there also is an aspect that it's more than just like David Brill looking at his crystal ball, or if I remember correctly, I might be wrong, but wasn't like Dionne Warwick, wasn't she on some kind of commercial with like, maybe it wasn't her, it wasn't she, but like there was some sort of like star, if I remember correctly, to my youth or semi-youth, where they were like, call this number, this psychic hotline.
Oh,
right?
yes, the psychic hotline.
Was it Dionne Warwick? So it's more than that. I'm sorry to Dionne Warwick if I'm wrong, but it was someone who was well known, who was encouraging people to do this. So it's more than that. Obviously, it has the wisdom of the crowd, or or the frenzy of the crowd. But I think it also can push the results, right, in a way that just peering into your own crystal ball may not. That self-fulfilling prophecies and all those sorts of things. No pun intended with the whole call a psychic hotline. But I do think the national security concerns that people have raised. David alluded to this, but as people may know, and I won't name any names, but the House Oversight Committee has launched an investigation into some prediction markets over concerns that some employees of the government might be using insider information. Yeah. So I think what some have said, and by the way, some of this information is available on CoinDesk. There's an article saying Congress hits some folks that I won't talk about with a massive insider trading probe. This article is by Olivier Acuna. So basically that someone is potentially going to propose that members of Congress and others can't participate in prediction markets. It's interesting because it's getting back into the same kind of, I mean, not the same thing, but when David and you and Ron were talking about, the ethics kind of discussions in other contexts.
Yeah. David, Josh, thanks so much. Real quickly, shout out to David Wysocki, co-chair of our tokenization working group. David, thanks for watching. Prediction markets are being used as a directional hedge for equity rate positions, albeit with basis risk. Absolutely, and well put, David. Thank you so much. David Brill, we've only got a few moments, and then I think one of you is getting on a jet and flying out or something. But I want to talk a little bit about macroeconomic. And you spent a lot of time in the past talking about interest rates, talking about employment data. We bothered Josh on 8:30 on a Friday morning with latest economic statistics and CPI and PPI data. David, I had a really interesting conversation with a colleague the other day, and one of his perspectives was, well, why do I need to bother buying crypto? Where's the alpha for that? I could just put it into the S&P.
Mm. Or you could get 5% on treasuries, or
We
close
can get 5% on treasuries. Shout out to Adam Goldberg, who mentioned that yesterday at the Crypto Asset Working Group. It's an interesting and solid thesis, David, but what changes it for crypto?
It's a good question. I want to run through some of the numbers just so we have perspective for everybody. So based off of CPI in April, where the current reading is like 3.8% year over year.
Yeah.
The inflation forecast for the second quarter is 6%. And energy CPI is like 18% year over year. But we know why that is.
Yeah.
And like sentiment is like at an all-time record low.
Mm-hmm.
And the 1-year inflation expectation is somewhere between like 4.5% to 5%.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this high risk environment, I think crypto has a bit of a harder time moving higher as opposed to equities with that sort of risk, environment in play, and the inability to borrow cheaply to invest and use sort of borrowings and hedging from that perspective to do that. So I think that's one of the things. And I think the other thing is we still need a catalyst, and maybe clarity is that catalyst, but we still need a catalyst to get people excited again, especially retail, who've seen the whipsaw in the market and, have been really kind of moved into, tech stocks and prediction markets.
Yeah. David, Josh, we've only got a moment or two left. We're coming up on the long Memorial Day weekend. David, I'm assuming you'll be at the beachfront compound. What are your plans for the next 3 days?
Well, first, I want to, take a moment to remember all the people who have died fighting for our country. And, that's why we have Memorial Day. So I want to really honor them, and we'll be thinking about them on Monday.
Yep.
Yes, I'm looking to be here. I'll be doing some reading. I'll be watching intently the basketball playoffs, a couple of barbecues thrown in. And as you see, Amber in the back will probably want to be walked quite a bit this weekend.
Can I share one thing, David, as a total aside before we get to Josh? I've been in a lot of meetings this week. We've all been in a lot of meetings this week. Watching Amber stretch out on the couch and just relaxing is the best meeting I've seen and had all week long. Josh, what about you?
I think I will be trying to enjoy a bit of relaxation, also catching up on some reading, organizing some stuff given my my very recent move, and yeah, I'm just happy. What about you, Ron?
Me, well, as you both know, so absolutely, honoring those who fell for the Memorial Day holiday. I might be doing a bit of Band of Brothers binge watching with some family members over the weekend. As you both know, on a separate topic, I sometimes try to deep dive into different topics on the weekend. So thanks for the photonics thing, Josh. Really appreciate it. But the other thing I'm looking at that I'm definitely going to bother you both about is trading of compute power. If you look at Larry Fink's comment, and if you look at, there are exchanges like Compute Exchange. To your point, David, about AI and the ability to leverage and use TPUs and CPUs, you can actually buy or sell compute power in an exchange, in a market. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops, and hopefully I'll understand it. I'm not sure. But otherwise, it's going to be a really sedate weekend. I just want to wrap up. David, Josh, thank you both so much. Josh, again, thank you. Congratulations.
Yes.
Pardon me.
Josh.
Rume, Mark, Adesola, David, thank you all for watching. We'll have this posted on YouTube. If you have additional questions for the three of us, info@wsba.co. Otherwise, David, Josh, have a great long weekend, and I will see you both next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.